Hello once again from the Midlands. I'm Patrick Burns, and with me to digest the results of the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, I'm joined by two MPs from Staffordshire. Rob Flello is the Labour MP for Stoke-on-Trent South, and Aidan Burley is the Conservative MP for Cannock Chase. And yes, Rob is taking part in Movember. It's where chaps grow moustaches for charity to raise awareness of a variety of men's cancers, and we'll have more about that before the end of the programme, by which stage, of course, that will have grown even bushier still. I can't wait. But our main political event of this week made slightly more of an impression than Rob's moustache: the election of our 5 police and crime commissioners, with, as predicted, some seriously low turnout figures. Staffordshire's were the lowest anywhere in England and Wales. Within that force area, for every 10 voters in Stoke-on-Trent, 9 stayed away.
Only one of the candidates gave me any information, and I had no other information other than going on the internet, and I thought it was poor, and I actually don't agree with I think you should have gone to a vote whether we actually really needed a commissioner.
I didn't know, so unfortunately I didn't vote no.
I don't think there was enough information about the candidates or about the campaign.
Didn't really understand what it was all about, so I didn't vote. Why didn't you vote?
I didn't know what it was all about. I think I had some information through the post, but I didn't read it.
Now, Aidan Burley, you worked very closely with the former Police Minister, Nick Herbert, in evolving this vision of modern-day policing with commissioners at its heart. And, you know, on the evidence of Stoke there, and indeed throughout the country, throughout the Midlands, overwhelmingly the voters have rejected it.
Well, clearly the turnout was disappointing, and I think we'll need to learn the lessons for next time. And I suspect not holding the elections in the middle of the winter when it's cold and foggy would be a good start.
But your government didn't really get behind it. Nick Herbert was the cheerleader, and he was sacked, and we haven't heard much from Damien Green about policing.
Well, look, the point I'd make is that the individuals elected last Thursday have a far greater democratic mandate than what they have replaced. In the West Midlands, Bob Jones got 117,000 votes on a turnout of 12%. He replaces the West Mids Police Authority that had a combined number of votes of just 25,000, which would be about a 2% turnout. But the proof of this policy, I don't think, is going to be in the turnout. It's going to be in what these individuals do over the next 4 years. Do they drive down crime? Do they sort out antisocial behaviour in the areas? And if they do, I think the turnout will be a lot higher next time when people understand what they're there to do.
And Rob, your party didn't exactly cover itself in glory either. It just recycled party politicians rather than a new breed of new people. And no wonder, really, the voters in Stoke and elsewhere didn't really turn out for you.
Well, no, I think, and forgive me, but I would really disagree with Aidan on this. The government knew damn fine well what it was doing, having an election in November, because the debates in Parliament and all the discussions were saying if you have a vote in November, the turnout will be lower. But I think what we've seen, actually, is that the Prime Minister has embarrassed himself even more over this by having it in November and having such an appalling turnout, even worse than they were predicting. But for me, the fundamental really is this is a waste of £100 million that could have been so much better spent in other areas. And really, I'm expecting, well, I'll wait a long time, wait for the Prime Minister to come and apologise to the country for having these elections.
An apology is due from the government? £100 million wasted?
Well, the point that Rob doesn't tell you is that, of course, this is actually the same cost as the existing police authorities. They already cost £100 million a year to run, but this individual will actually be accountable to the electorate.
Incidentally, you can hardly have a go at the trade unions for low turnouts in ballots when you've presided over this.
Well, I don't think that's a fair comparison. The right comparison would be to have a minimum turnout to elect the General Secretary. Okay. What we said with trade unions is a small number of hardcore militant left shouldn't hold the country to a ransom.
Well,
I was
just going to say, again, ridiculous, because this time last year the Prime Minister was saying that the results of the union ballots weren't legitimate because of the low turnout. Okay. What does this say?
To be continued. In a moment, we will be joined by the new Police Commissioner for Gloucestershire. But before that, let's see what happened when Warwickshire's Commissioner hit his new beat with BBC Coventry and Warwickshire's political reporter Sian Greszczyk. What impact will that low turnout have on our 5 new PCCs?
It was the same story right across the region. Just a handful of papers in some ballot boxes in Staffordshire. Not exactly enough to keep the counters occupied. In Coventry, it was proving hard to stay awake. while in Shrewsbury the intentions of some voters who did bother to turn up were far from certain. The size of the operation in Birmingham disguised the 12% turnout in the biggest force area outside of London. In the run-up to these elections, the main talking point was fears of a low turnout. Here in Warwickshire, just 15% of people decided to vote. But now they're in post, what can we expect from our new police and crime commissioners? In Warwickshire, this airline pilot quit his job, spending part of his children's inheritance to stand as an independent. Used to landing in challenging conditions, the gamble paid off. What is your top priority? Day one, what are you going to do?
I'm a great fan of local policing. And to get that police model working correctly, the safer neighbourhood model working correctly, where people know their local officer and the local officer knows his or her patch really well, knows the local offenders, that's really valuable.
OK, well, we're here in Leamington. Let's go and talk to a few people.
OK, let's go and do that.
You've got a tricky job of balancing, funding and also the demands of the police and the demands of the victims of crime and everything else. I don't know enough.
It sounds as though you've got it in one, actually. That's exactly what it's going to be about.
What do you want Ron to do? What should he focus on?
Well, everyone's saying the same thing, really, that, crime on the streets, this sort of thing. So I think that's obviously the main thing. I can't think of anything else that is more important than that.
Yeah, no, that has come up a lot during the campaign.
It has, and it does with everybody.
For the first time, I didn't actually cast my vote, though I was leaning towards electing you because you're independent, and I feel very strongly that this shouldn't be a political job.
A familiar concern, but what about rank and file officers? Will they support their commissioners? Do you think low turnout is really going to haunt police and crime commissioners, though?
It's a mandate, however you look at it, however low the turnout, it's a mandate to start. It's a democratic process, publicly elected people, accountable to the public. They will be very much held to account in the next elections. If it's higher turnout, great. If it's not, we're still going to get on with it. Policing's 24/7. My colleagues are out there doing it day after day. It's not that important to them who's in charge. They carry on protecting the public.
The very same public who in overwhelming numbers decided not to vote. It's now up to the commissioners to prove their worth.
We'll have to wait and see. Sian Greszczyk reporting there. And as promised, the Police and Crime Commissioner-elect of Gloucestershire, Martin Searle, also joins us here. He's a former police superintendent, commanded operations in other places, Cheltenham and Tewkesbury, and he was elected on a promise to keep politics out of policing. Congratulations, Martin, but let me break it to you gently. You are now a politician.
Well, that's what a dictionary says.
You cannot be an apolitical figure. Whether you've been elected, you've campaigned, you've subjected yourself to the electoral will. You have to exercise the soft powers of politics now.
Well, yes, actually, we've been doing that in policing for a long time, as all the parties pointed out. When I was working for the Association of Chief Police Officers, it was a political environment, but the big difference is it wasn't party political. We always worked with them, no matter what colour they were, and that's what I'll bring to Gloucestershire.
Isn't there a danger, though, that as a former senior officer yourself, you're going to be meddlesome? You're going to find it very difficult to keep out of the operational areas that are supposed to be the matter for the police force themselves.
People say that. I actually do think people like myself will know where the line is. Others may not. I'm very clear what is operational and what is strategic. Now, the reality is there's a big grey area in between, because there is some mixing. But I think as a former commander, I'll know where the operational line is and where the strategic line is. So I don't think that's actually a problem.
Among your biggest and earliest challenges, of course, you've had an acting chief constable in your area for over 6 months.
Yeah.
You've got to appoint the new one.
Well, we have, yeah, and I think, I wish that the former chief or the current chief, all good fortune for the future. But clearly, Gloucestershire needs some stability now. It needs a chief officer team that will bring stability and will take the force forward.
Take a force forward, in a nutshell. You've also got 25% budget cuts to contend with, haven't you?
Yes, that's not great. I mean, give some credit to the outgoing authority. They've handled that relatively well. The budget is actually a big issue, and that's going to be an issue for every commissioner. We can cope with where we are, but we can't take any more cuts, and then we'll start to fight if they take any more off us.
There you are, Aidan. You've spawned a new generation of predominantly independent politicians here who are going to have to fight in certain circumstances. They say, what have you done?
Well, I wish Martin well, and I think independents proved popular with the electorate. 12 were elected nationally because people see the police as independent, and I think they wanted that in their police and crime.
So it's a great Tory triumph to see this wave of independence.
Well, of course, what people don't know is what independents actually stand for, because at least with a Labour or Conservative politician, you get an idea of how they would guide the force and set the strategic direction. What Martin has to do, and what all the other independents now have to do, is do their best to drive down crime in their area and stand on their record in 4 years' time. And I think only then will people know what the independents they elected actually stood for.
And that is actually what Grant Shapps, the Tory chairman, said earlier in the programme today, isn't it, Rob? That people will cotton on to this now that high-profile figures are in place.
Well, I think what actually we're seeing is the fact that the government are, some would say cleverly, some would say cynically, positioning people like Martin. And he has my congratulations and my support, but positioning people like Martin so that when the further cuts come down the line, we've already seen nearly 7,000 officers go across the country. It'll be 15,000 by 2015, frontline officers losing their jobs. What we'll see is the government turning around and saying, oh, it's not us, Gov, it's your local PCC. And I think it's preparing the scapegoats now. From a Prime Minister, really, that time and time again, it's always somebody else's fault.
Aidan shakes his head.
I mean, Martin speaks with authority as an ex-policeman himself. He knows that politics is actually, policing is all political anyway. It is about the allocation of scarce resources and how you choose to allocate those finite resources. And
like
he will have to do that,
£100
and he will have to set the strategic direction for his force and stand on his record in 4 years'
Okay,
time.
let me raise a thought for each of you. We heard in the film there, Ron Ball in Warwickshire, a very strong emphasis, it seemed to me, on the community policing side of his job as he sees it. What if you have, especially with independent people in charge now, different emphasis from one force to another? How then can you have a coherent system of policing across the wide areas that, you know, crime doesn't respect police force areas, does it? Yes, I
mean, I think what's important actually is that the public now have a directly accountable individual that they can contact and they can hold responsible. I'll just tell you one anecdote. In London, when Boris Johnson was elected as the effective PCC, the number of letters to City Hall about crime went up from 30 a week to 300. And I think that is good for democracy. And as I say, people can hold that person to account after 4 years on what they've done.
Direct line of... I'll come to you in a moment, Martin. Rob?
I think you can quote anecdotes about writing letters. I mean, I get plenty of letters into my post bag as a local member of Parliament about concerns over policing. But I'd come back to the point that you're right about the scarce resources, but £100 million that was wasted on this election could go into far more, better use, 3,000 more police officers. And it's really people like Martin, who are going to have to carry the can for the cuts.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Policing is not all political. Policing is not political on the streets, it's not political in the forces, and that's important. But you're wrong to say they don't know what they're going to get from me. I've written a very comprehensive manifesto, far more comprehensive than any of my opposition did. Day one, the team will be dissecting my manifesto and they'll be delivering it. We'll be delivering it. So it's completely wrong to say I'm an unknown quantity. The county know me well. I've lived there for 55 years. They know what they're going to get. A lot didn't vote for me. I appreciate that. And a huge amount of that was not just because, you know, it was cold, it was wet. They didn't particularly want this to be a political fight. And the first thing you should do really is say, next election, should politicians actually be standing or not? Resign before, not after.
Okay, quick thoughts from each of you on that point.
Isn't that a positive thing? He's written a manifesto, people can read it, they know who he is, they can contact him, and they can see what his plans for the area. Compare that with what he's just replaced, an invisible police authority that nobody had ever heard of and costs the same amount of money.
Again, the nonsense. I mean, what we had is a situation which Martin himself said a few minutes ago, where the police authority had done a good job up until the point of handing over. But the issue is, well, they did in Stoke-on-Trent, but the issue is that actually this is an election that was centre for the government. This was one of their key planks of having police and crime commissioners, and the public overwhelmingly have said we don't want any of it.
Martin, looking forward to getting on the job, on with the job in Gloucestershire there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. It's been a hard fight to get here, a long journey, but it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's a big job. It's not just about on the streets, it's about budgets, it's a big job.
Okay, thank you, and particular thanks to Martin for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Well, now, just imagine this. You run a business, and after years of training, your workforce start to retire. But there aren't enough younger people around who know how to do the job or even want to do it. So your business struggles. It's what's known as the skills gap, and it's a big problem here. This week, our business correspondent, Peter Plisner, has been looking for some answers to it.
There's no doubt the workforce is getting older, and this Birmingham firm provides the evidence. Although here there are apprentices, its managing director says training them is a slow process.
The skilled people I've got at the moment are generally in the age of 50 and beyond, which means then in 15, 20 years' time, I've got no workforce.
The opening last week of the Skills Show, designed to get more young people interested in acquiring skills. In attendance at Birmingham's NEC was the business secretary, who's a big fan.
It's like the Olympics, but it's in skills, and Britain actually does very well at it. There's ferocious competition from countries like Korea and Germany, but we're very good at this. But we've got to build on it because the country very much needs skilled workers. Young people need jobs.
And this is what it's all about, young people from schools all over the UK having a go, getting enthused. But will it really help reduce the skills gap? Teachers accompanying the kids certainly thought so.
Hopefully they'll see that, not all jobs are TV stars and pop stars and footballers, that here is where, this is how the country works, this is how things are made, and this is where most of them will end up working in jobs like this when they're older.
In the past, when people left school, a careers advisor would look at qualifications, then advise you on what potential careers were open to you. But that was a pretty limiting and demoralising experience. But now, with the Skills Show, young people can effectively choose for themselves. And according to those behind the event, it's also helping to get a clearer picture of exactly what's needed in the future.
There's been a significant amount of work with employers to understand what the skill gap is, so that colleges and training providers can respond appropriately to the needs of the workplace.
The problem is, unless we're able to attract the workers of tomorrow, then youth unemployment and the skills gap can only get worse.
Peter Plisner at the Skills Show, which incidentally ended yesterday. Rob, if you think particularly of Stoke, a lot of those issues there, low skills base, structural unemployment. Your government was in power for 13 years. Predominantly over the years, Labour have been in charge in Stoke as well. So a lot of this has happened on your watch, hasn't it?
Well, a lot of investment and a lot of work went on while we were in power to actually take workforces who are losing their jobs and reskill them and retrain them into other careers. So there are an awful lot of businesses now employing people in Stoke-on-Trent and the wider North Staffordshire area who used to work in the mines, who used to work in the ceramic industry, for example, who are retrained, reskilled under Labour through investment that went in.
But now, hardly a week goes by without Vince Cable popping up in our patch with yet another announcement about apprenticeship, which has really accelerated apprenticeship schemes since this government came in.
Well, what they did, of course, is taken the apprentice system that we had picked up from the floor. It was a defunct system when we came in '97. We re-engineered it, we invested in it, we helped it, we supported it and actually got it working again. And, credit where it's due, actually. Taken a situation that was improving and improved and continued it. So, I'm quite happy to knock the government when they take knocking, but actually when they've taken something that we've actually got up off the ground and got working again and continued with that, that's good.
But of course, unemployment has remained static here in the Midlands, while elsewhere it's actually improved a bit. So in terms of David Cameron's race analogy, we're falling behind in that race, aren't we?
Well, you mentioned unemployment, you mentioned Labour's record. The most shocking statistic I've heard since being an MP is actually during the boom years between 2000 and 2010 under the last Labour government. Unemployment went up in the West Midlands. So during the boom years, the number of people in jobs actually went down. So we need to do something about this. In Staffordshire, we have the JCB Academy, where young people over the age of 14 can learn both engineering and business. And I certainly think we need more innovative academies like the JCB.
Thinking of long-term, younger unemployed people, what can they do to help themselves, do you think?
Well, one of the things I've done as an MP is held 3 jobs fairs in Cannock Chase since being elected. Lots of young people have come, they've networked with employers, and I always say to them, go and offer to work for free, go and offer to do some work experience in the companies that are looking to take on people, because you often find that is a first step in the door that then leads to a job after. You need to be proactive.
Well, what of course we've had is the government, let's not forget this, have been in power for 2.5 years. They're halfway through, more than halfway through their term now. And what we've seen is instead of picking up the early starts of the growth, the economy turning around back in 2010 and actually push the economy and make it grow, what we've seen is 2.5 years of stagnation. The flat line, well, we have the numbers speak for themselves.
We've new private sector jobs.
The figure's actually lower than
we could go on, but we
It's
can't.
a flat line.
So now it really is time for our roundup of the political week in the Midlands in just 60 seconds. Here's BBC WM's political reporter Elizabeth Klinko.
Just days after appearing on this programme, former Independent MP Richard Taylor was back at Westminster. The retired doctor launched a new party, National Health Action, with candidates in up to 50 seats. 2 serious incidents in a week at Birmingham Prison. 4 officers were injured by a remand prisoner, then an inmate climbed onto the roof. There's concern about the private firm running the jail.
What we've got to do is have people who understand that structure, who can run it, not just somebody just plonked in because they have a better price or whatever.
West Midlands Fire and Ambulance Services will share a number of fire stations. They say it'll make them cheaper and faster. Drivers in Coventry have been left confused by double black lines. The double yellows have been painted over as part of a new parking scheme. But if you park on them, you'll still get a ticket. And Birmingham Council's revealed its bill for equal pay compensation will top £750 million. Women were paid less than men for doing the same jobs.
Yes, that equal pay issue, which Albert Bohr, the leader, says actually threatens the City Council with becoming bankrupt. Now, you were a former Birmingham City Councillor yourself. This has gone back over successive administrations, successive parties, hasn't it?
Absolutely, generations. I mean, I was, to be fair, a City Councillor for about 2 years, but it is a problem that's been going for a long time. It was put right as far as the it's still employed workforce are concerned. What, of course, this decision is about people who've left the employment getting properly recompensed. It's a very large amount of money. The local authority, and of course it's not just going to be Birmingham Authority that's going to be faced with this. What we had with the previous government was when the previous equalisation payments were required, we had a very helpful and supportive previous government. I'm not sure we're going to get the same.
How do you read this and what can be done? Will there be a bailout, for example?
Well, I mean, I feel sorry for the dinner ladies that didn't get the bonuses, whereas the dustmen did. And as Rob said, you know, this has gone back a long time. But I think the challenge for Albert Bohr and the Labour-run Birmingham administration is not to use this as a fig leaf for cuts that they don't need to make. They need to absorb this within their operation, find efficiency savings to fund this and not cut services as a result.
They're going to have to
That's
cut
the challenge
services.
for them.
OK, it's the story that must be told now. We've been talking about Movember. You've been growing this to highlight men's cancer issues. It's the second time you've done it. How's it going? Tell us about it.
It will be the last time I do it as well, because it itches like mad. But it's very, very good causes. It's not just about raising profile, it's about raising money as well for Movember. And it's, as you say, men's cancers. It's really important that we raise the profile of this issue and ideally raise some funding so that this matter that, you know, there's 3 guys sitting here, never talked about for generations, but needs to be addressed.
Congratulate Rob on a tremendous
clean shave.
Well, I think it would take me about 3 months to grow that sort of General Melchett style, if I may say so. But I mean, tremendous effort and many congratulations. And I think, as you say, you know, highlighting a very worthy cause.
Needs to be done.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for being with us here today, and I hope the end of the month comes soon for you, Rob.
So do I. Thank you.
My thanks to you both. Next week I'll be joined by 2 of our longest serving MPs, who are also famously free spirits for the Conservatives, Bill Cash and Geoffrey Robinson for Labour. Here, though, is Andrew Neil again.